In many ways, we stand today at a juncture for all humanity where we have to choose between a blessing and a curse. The blessings of AI are amazing, and we see them already in Israel. We see them around the world. You can see the addition of decades of life to the human lifespan. Precision medicine dedicated to every person's genetic composition. Robots, I know you know nothing about this. Robots who care for the elderly. I think you're making some of them here. You can have precision agriculture and autonomous factories that create abundance beyond our imagination. What you call the end of scarcity, which is a departure in human history. You can have all these blessings. You can have the end of traffic jams, with above ground and in the air, AI-driven vehicles, all these things that are real problems.
They were dressed head to foot in black body armor. She even described the body armor in greater detail than anyone else. She described how it was on the forearms and on the shins, and the chest was some sort of like a breastplate, metallic, and they were wearing these helmets, these large helmets, elongated helmets. I covered the entirety of their faces. So the very same description that everybody else gave to us, this is what Talia encountered. They were very tall. One of them, which she calls the Gringo, was taller than me, considerably taller than me. The other, I think she said, was about my height, if I recall. That one I dubbed the Peruvian. The reason why is because according to Talia, these individuals spoke Spanish. The taller one, she says, spoke Spanish like me, like a Gringo with an accent. And the smaller one spoke like a Peruvian. And I specifically asked Talia, the Spanish that this individual spoke, was there an accent? Was it Ecuadorian? Was it Bolivian? Was it Cuban? Or did it sound like Peruvian? Did they have an accent? She said, he sounded just like all of us. So I started calling this individual the Peruvian. So that's how I'm going to refer to them, the Peruvian face peeler and the Gringo face peeler. We don't know if they're people. I'm not saying they're human beings. This is the testimony that Talia gave us there in her backyard. So these individuals have her in this manner, but they're hovering, mind you. They're hovering on these platforms, and they proceed to lift her up. Now, I don't recall the initial thrust that's needed before they get going to get off of the ground. Aside from these hovering circular platforms, you also have what I'm describing as advanced aerospace vehicles that these guys travel in. This is really fascinating to me. The first time we heard this was a particular woman, an older woman, was describing the encounter she had with these beings. Several encounters she had with these beings. By the way, we really got a sense of how terrified these people were. And then they proceeded to take out a powder. The Peruvian put some powder in his hand, and then he put some cream. He had this little bottle with cream in it, and he mixed the powder and the cream together. Then he took a nasal syringe, he sucked up the substance and shot it up her nose. Then they took out a larger tube, almost like, it sounded like, and I asked her, sort of like a large toothpaste packet. And they put the cream on their hands. And this was the guy that had her from behind. So recall, the Gringo has her from behind. He's covering her mouth. The Peruvian has her by the feet. And the Gringo proceeds to smear this cream all over her face. And she said that her face instantly went numb when the cream was applied, and it began to swell. And she even tells us that at that point she heard the Peruvian guy say, be careful, don't apply too much. You're going to ruin the flesh. And then she later explained that what she heard them saying was something about how if they apply too much, the flesh is going to stick to the skin when they take it off. Something along those lines. It wasn't exactly clear, but something like that. And then, and I may be skipping some minor details, and then they took out one of them took out a small device that you and I think is a laser scalpel, and they began to make an incision in her neck. In other words, they were very likely going to peel her face off, just like the legends say. At this moment, Talia began to struggle. She began to lift up the mask, the helmet of the guy behind her, the gringo holding her from behind. And as she was doing this, somebody, I think it was him, or if not the Peruvian guy who was holding her legs, one of them slapped her in the face. And when they did this, they dropped her. And this gave her a moment in which her mouth was no longer being covered, and she was able to scream. So she hits the ground, she screams. Her brother and her family members are on the other side of the house on the porch, sitting there outside. They have their flashlights on them. Talia's brother gets on the scene with his flashlight. The neighbors are up higher on the hill. They come down with their flashlights, and they all see the same thing. What they see are two individuals, these two individuals we just described, dressed in black, head to foot, very tall, hovering on these platforms, on these circular platforms. And Talia is lying there on the ground, bloodied up from the incision in her neck. Her face is swollen. And Talia says that at this moment, she heard the Peruvian face peeler say to the gringo, let's go, let's get out of here. And the gringo replied, no, we can't just leave her here. And according to Talia, he proceeded to grab her by the hair and try to drag her and perhaps lift her off the ground on his platform. The neighbors see this. They have their flashlights. They start to yell. And eventually the gringo drops her. And these guys maneuver themselves to where there's an opening in the trees. And they lift off the ground at a high rate of speed and disappear into the sky. What does that mean in terms of security? How should we approach this situation? But when we went back in the village and began to hear more testimonies, it became abundantly evident that no, we're not dealing with narcos. And what really crossed out the narco possibility for me was these advanced aerospace vehicles. The narcos don't have those. We're talking about probably alien tech, at least alien reverse engineered technology here. The narcos don't have these things. They have the best of maybe what our military has and has deployed in, to some extent, in Afghanistan and Iraq, but they don't have silent hovering craft they don't have that. So narcos, no.